Hi, James Hurst with another influential drummer today that's considered the best, one of the best, not the best, but one of the best in my book. Nobody's going to know of him unless you lived in this town, and it's Chuck Simons. Chuck Simons was my first drum teacher, a huge inspiration to me in so many ways, and what I consider to be a master of the brush, lost the art of brushes. I have a book he wrote and whatnot, but I grew up in this little town. Eventually, I Chuck owned the music store, but was also teaching at the college for a while. He got so busy that I started taking from one of his students named Mike Ryan. But while with Chuck, and even when I would just go visit the store, he would basically sit me down and give me a lesson or write something on a piece of paper, or he'd say, "Come on, we go next door." There was a little restaurant called the Hungry Bear, which was next to Chuck's at the time. And I would have a Coke, and he'd have a coffee, and he'd take napkins and literally write drum lessons on them for me to learn and list off drummers to listen to and have notes on them. And I have some of those notes. But anyway, I just became totally engulfed into what he said, what he had to offer, and whatnot, and was very intuitive. And he would actually take me every once in a while on gigs with him, with his little jazz groups and whatnot, and for lack of a better term, invite me up to sit in with the band. And I learned several lessons during that. One time I was playing a brush thing and playing a basic brush pattern, and the bass player turns around and he says, "Go into a two feel." And I honestly had no idea what a two feel was. And so that was like, okay. So Chuck made a note, teach him a two feel and everything. And so, but I would get to play or sit in with these bands now and then. And and I know other drummers that became really involved with Chuck, and he was a major inspiration. Benji Bohannon is one. I actually met Benji. I was already gone, but I went back and met and had a lesson with him, and he's a great drummer out there doing all kinds of stuff. He probably got to spend the most time with Chuck doing those gigs. But anyway, Chuck was a huge inspiration and super influential. And I've got pictures that I'll eventually put up on the wall again and stuff. But there's not a day that goes by that I don't pick up a pair of brushes or some of maybe a lick that I do that I don't think of Chuck and Ungats, and he would start to tell me things and got to feed the babies and some of his sayings and stuff like that. But I can't imagine not having him as my first teacher. And when I got my first drum from him, it was a Slingerland Gene Krupa drum. I wish I still had it. Oddly enough, I had the drum case, but not the drum. I traded it in one time. Stupid move. But I had got this new drum, and for my first lesson, he pulled out like they didn't have Sharpies then that I know, but like a marker, a black magic marker, and drew a dot in the center of the head and said, "Keep your sticks in that head, in that dot." And I was like mad that he messed up my drum, in my opinion, but I did what I was supposed to do. And a lot of people, he was making drum throws at one time, and I still have the top to this throw, and I'm not sure if the bottom's still here or not. But he was calling it the sit case, and it was basically a PVC tube that had a bottom on it and a bungee cord that would attach the top to it. It was a wood thing, basically made into a seat. Back before all the big heavy duty drones came out, and you would put your sticks and you could put your snare stand and stuff like that inside of the case. And but if you turn the top of the seat over, there was a little piece of rubber, seriously no bigger than a quarter, and he would want you to practice playing on that pad. And so Chuck was very picky, but a great influence, and certainly turned me on to a lot of drummers and what their importance was in the history of jazz. And you always remember your early drum teachers or your first drum teacher, and so I do. And I communicated with Chuck long after I moved away, and when he passed, I went and put some sticks on his grave. If they stayed there or not, I don't know. And I visited his wife, and she gave me some pictures so I could go make copies of them and return them. And that's how he ended up pictures on my wall and stuff like that. And he was just a joy. And I got into a thing of stripping down drums that were in bad shape and restaining them, and I did some for him even. So an important figure in my life, and certainly a super influential drummer. And there's a plaque on the building when you go there. It's not a music store anymore, but it's a little town called Murray. If you go there, Chuck was a huge influence on me, and I guarantee you a lot of other people. And even for if you didn't study him, you could go to the store and hang out just to hear him and listen to him talk, because he was a treat to listen to. And if he ever judged you in a competition, he was strict. So I learned a lot. One of my favorite influences, Chuck Simons.